People started thinking, well, work for home effectively. Then corporates started thinking about reducing their footprint and saving, potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars in rent. But the problem we've got now is the large corporates are ordering staff back to site, and you've got to think, why are they doing that?
Hi guys, thanks for joining us today on today's episode. We've got Eric Brown from QVS Group, who specialises in all things construction fit out. So if you're someone out there that's listening or watching and has some interest in, construction fit outs on your tenancy, or if you're an owner occupied of a commercial space and wanting to add value or thought of the idea, well, no better person to talk about it than Eric Brown. Okay, we've got Eric Brown from QVS Construction Fit Outs.
Can we say it again? Quality, value,
Quality,
service.
value, service.
Quality,
That's what
value, service. I like it.
It's exactly what we should be striving for, all right, with every customer, right?
Yeah,
essentially. Right. And how did you come up with that? It's just your ethos, isn't it?
Yeah, it
sounds
like
like
what we do.
Yeah, I know. We've been working with your clients for some time, and we can really relate to that because we strive for that ourselves. I don't know how great we are, but hopefully the feedback tells
You guys are pretty
story.
good.
No, I appreciate that.
I've used you on some of my stuff, so you're pretty good.
I appreciate that, Eric. But of course, we're dealing with your clients, and they've always been very happy with the work that they've done through you. And so that's always a telltale sign of someone. But essentially, what got you in the industry, Eric?
I was traveling in Europe, and my father had a property maintenance business, and an Irish guy was stealing some money off us, and Dad could have asked me to come back, and did a degree in science in biology at uni. So I was going to be a marine biologist, but of course there's no work out there for marine biology, so
yeah.
I just jumped into it and then actually found I loved it. I still love it. Like 27 years later, I still love it.
There you go.
So I did a Cert 4 in building and then quantity surveying, and just studied at nights and worked during the day. And
so you're always there. You can always keep us in check then. I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. We're always keeping us sharp with our
well, I know
dollars
the
and
theory.
cents.
The practical side is a different thing.
Yeah. Well,
it's good to learn something unless you put it in practice.
I agree.
I don't
and
think you can say you're
you
expert
probably but you do put it into practice. That's the thing. You understand exactly at any point in time the cost of materials, the cost of labor, the cost of doing something. The cost of establishing a site, it's not always one size fits all. And sometimes from a quantity surveying, I was just talking to our team the other day, you could sit there and, work out the cost of a job. But if, you've got poor access, how do you quantify that?
Yeah.
It's not exactly.
Actually interesting. I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit later too, that people don't realise they can depreciate fit outs either. So it's a real education, a segue for my clients to me to tell them, you can actually depreciate this fit out if you want.
It's actually very funny you say that, because this is something I wanted to talk about, but you brought it up now. I mean, why not sort of dive into it right now? But we actually quite often get questions like that from our clients, that they've taken over a lease of a property, and then they have gone and done some fit out themselves, and they're often not sure about, if they can depreciate or things like that. So maybe Tuan, that's where our expert lies.
Yeah.
How does that sort of work for them when they are doing their own fit out?
Yeah, that's I guess it's one of the huge benefits, isn't it, of even doing a fit out?
But I'd say 90% of people, or maybe even more, maybe 95% of people don't actually even think about that.
For sure.
Agreed.
It's like crazy.
In the midst of running the business and starting it up, probably easy to forget, and I don't really blame them, but it's a huge benefit. I mean, for myself, even if I take myself, and please jump in, Eric, if you have an example, but when we did our office, we had an office, in the middle of Sydney here, and when we bought that office, that came with a fit out already. So we bought the unit. And it came with a fit out, and the first thing I did was strip the fit out, because I was like, well, it's 20 years old. And because I'm I'm a tax depreciation expert, I knew that I could claim a scrap value out of everything that wasn't claimed. And if you get a 40-year depreciation schedule, and there's only been 20 years of effectively being used, well, there's 20 years you could scrap. So essentially half of the cost of construction, I could scrap it in the immediate year of completing that demolition. So then I did that, but then I prepared a tax depreciation schedule because I did a new fit out. And when I did that, at that time, I think it was during the middle of COVID, the temporary full expensing, which is immediate write-off of plant and equipment. So if you put in your cooktops and you put in air conditioning units. You could write off up to, I think it was unlimited.
Furniture, workstations.
It was unlimited, Eric, at that time because
Crazy,
they were trying to drive. The stimulus was trying to drive people to spend more money, and so we were writing off, 50 grand air conditioning units in our premises in 2020, 2021 tax return, which was awesome. And I think that's something that people often miss. And then I found out when you go buy, when you own a commercial property, and your tenant leaves the property because obviously they've finished their lease or they ditch their business and they have to close down the business. Well, essentially you own the fit out if the tenant walks out on it. And you can actually continue depreciating the fit out. I didn't even
know that.
I didn't even know that till probably only about 4 or 5 years ago when our client started had the same situation. They said, I've got a fit out now. Someone's just left it. What happens? Who claims it? There's still value and still being used. And then we worked out with the tax office that you can actually claim it.
We should write a blog on that for my website.
Yeah, I'm actually just written a blog.
People.
It's funny. I've just written a blog for Son, and I think he's going to be passing it over to you in our office. That'll be very good information, I think, for people out there that are getting into this space.
Well, you're right. So I think so many people think of, when they do that fit out, they don't actually realize there's so much more stuff that actually gain from that. So I think hopefully everyone today got some value just from that one point right there. But Eric, I'd like to go just back a step. I know you mentioned your father, got you into sort of, doing a little bit of property maintenance. But how was that switch from the property maintenance then into doing the full fit outs? How did that sort of come about from one thing to the next?
Yeah, well, fit outs are a lot sexier, I think, and kind of, and you can create space for people. Maintenance is just a bit boring, I think, painting a wall, painting a door.
Yep.
Like, I'm a little bit, I'm more interested in creating practical, inspirational spaces, and you don't get that in the maintenance. So it was kind of a natural progression, I think. It was a bit of a leap, but it just started off. And even now I'm changing, kind of evolving my business a little bit with commercial properties being a bit tight with COVID, since post-COVID. And there's so much to unpack in that. But I guess we start with people started thinking, well, we can work from home effectively. So then corporates started reducing or thinking about reducing their footprint and saving, potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars in rent.
Yep.
But the problem we've got now is the large corporates are ordering their staff back to site, and you've got to think, why are they doing that? The answer is they're not getting the productivity they got right at the start of COVID, and the sum of the parts is not as great as the sum of the whole. So when you can get your staff together to collaborate and to work together and bounce things off each other, the results are much greater than someone sitting at home or even on a computer screen. You don't really get the energy, you don't get the collaboration.
Very true.
So now fit outs have evolved into making them spaces more about collaborating, bringing people together, and there's a real push to get people back to the office.
Yeah. And
so you're now designing these spaces to have a more, a collaborative sort of environment instead of everyone being sort of separate. They want these sort of spaces now where everyone can have input, everyone can be together, and they can bounce ideas off us. So I love that.
And about getting people back to the office. So I did Momentum Media, for example. We put ping pong tables and a bar back in there, just so Friday night they could get people in the office, play a bit of ping pong, have a drink and socialise, and it's actually just about getting people back to the office.
Yeah.
So now people have to make room for their ping pong tables in their office. They have to account for
tables,
a bit of extra gaming areas and whatnot, maybe some bean bags as well. So is this sort of
wellness spaces are huge at the moment too. It's all about making your staff feel comfortable and happy to come to work. Years ago, it used to all be about the CEOs, and a trend was, if you looked at the major corporates, where was their head office, it was generally pretty close to where the CEO lived, because he just went, or she just went, I just don't want to travel too far, so if I live in Lane Cove, I'm going to put my corporate headquarters in Lane Cove. It's gone away from that now, because now it's all about, we need to get the staff. So when you're looking to buy a commercial property that you want someone to lease that space off you've got to think about, well, now companies are looking for space that is going to engage your staff. So is it close to a bar? Is it close to restaurants? Is it close to cafes? Is it close to public transport? Can staff park there? And it's a focus on staff, which I think is a pretty cool thing. It's gone a circle.
Yeah, it should be. I definitely think, I for one am all about, there's almost 30 of us in our team, onshore and 30 offshore. And it's really about, trying to get people to collaborate. And if you make them the most comfortable as possible, of course, then it allows them to come to work, with the energy that you'd expect so that they can do that in the most effective way possible. And in the last 3 years, I think ever since COVID was a thing, I think we had all of about 3 months working from home. I think it was from July all the way through to October 2021 when we had a lockdown in Sydney. But that was it. The rest of the time, I would encourage your staff to let's get together as best as possible, because we haven't really had a slow period. We've been the company's always been growing from year to year.
Yeah.
And essentially to have that type of growth and to be excited about that growth. I personally want to go to a workplace that continuously strives for growth, and to have that, we have to be connected.
And, how do you attract? How do you retain? How do you get the best out of your staff? You build them a workspace that works.
Yeah.
So that's one of my taglines. We build workspaces for people that work, because that's what it's all about, getting people to work effectively in a space.
So it sounds like, Eric, there's a lot more thought going into how businesses are actually fitting out their spaces these days. What do you see some of the internal trends inside the offices? What do you see that people are doing, a lot of these days? Like you said, is it more individual cubes? Is it more open? What are some of the sort of the trends that you see when designing these fit outs?
Yep. And normally it is a cyclical process. And over 25 years, 27 years, you can see those changes. COVID has kind of broke the mold a little bit. So I don't know if we'll ever get back into that cycle, because it's going to be different from now on.
Yeah.
But people are taking less space, but being smarter about how they plan those spaces.
Yes. Okay.
Big ones are quiet rooms and quiet spaces. So because of the open plan nature of a workspace now, you can even buy pods that you build and take with you where you go. They're great. Or you can build them out of plasterboard and glass. And
maybe some of those parents out there might need those for their houses. Those quiet rooms potentially. Maybe
I've done a
speak for yourself, Dan.
I've done a trial where I went inside, shut the door, and started yelling profanities at my mate that was standing outside. Couldn't hear me. So they're pretty good. That's one trend. The other trend is versatility of space. So operable walls and sliding doors and systems and mechanisms that can open spaces up and then close them off. And versatility is always popular. And then collaboration, wellness spaces, that stuff we talked about. I'm talking about building a putting green in an office space, because a lot of them like golfing, and I do their business deals on the golf space. And then another one with cushions and bean bags and meditation areas, and I've seen teepees in offices, all sorts of stuff. But about wellness is huge. Post-COVID, wellness is massive.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks.
You seen
about
any
their health
saunas?
Only in my day spas.
All right. Well,
and ice baths. Ice baths are big.
Yep. There you go. We've got the hot. Now we need the cold.
Yeah. We've just
put a sauna in.
We've put a sauna into our office,
right?
And I'm big on sauna. I've got one at home, and I use it every day after a run. And I thought, you know what? If it's good for me, it's good for the team. And so now it's on every day, twice a day, lunchtimes, after work, and mornings, like 3 times a day sometimes.
Lucky I bought my sluggers.
I know it's been. I think it's one of those things that you're right. Like you want to give them everything, all the benefits of that of lifestyle health. Like people are more in tune with it now than ever.
Yeah.
So why
not? And I kind of think they will be for a long time. I don't think it'll disappear. It's not going to be a trend. The COVID will always be around, but people are always going to reassess.
Yeah.
It was a massive shock to a lot of people, and I think people just reassessed how important their health is in their life,
and how important people are in your business, right?
I got a funny story that I was telling someone the other week, because I was watching this show called Alone, and have you seen it?
No.
So they just grab 10 random people and dump them in the bush somewhere. There's a series called Alone Australia, and no matter how tough you think you are and how strong you think you are and mentally resilient you think you are, and everyone goes in and going, I'm going to last 1,000 days, whatever. They get there and they get lonely.
Yeah.
Because humans, I think, we're kind of pack animals, and we need people.
It's true.
And they miss people and they get lonely. And it's not sometimes it's because they can't get enough food to survive or get cold or have accidents. But most of the time it's an underlying
social
feeling,
creatures, right?
Yeah, feeling of loneliness and depression comes from that. I've done a blog on that was another negative side of letting people work from home too much and saying you don't need to come in the office. Because on face value, a corporate with 1,500 square metres and you're paying over $1,000 a square metre and you cut your office in half, it's a lot of money you can save by that. But
could you make more if they were there?
What's the cost of it?
What's the cost of it?
That's right.
What if your staff are unhappy and unproductive?
You wouldn't be able to tell. Agreed.
So agreed. People like being near people.
Yeah, they're definitely social creatures. But I think like every time I personally, I don't know about you, Eric, but every time we've brought on one staff, I feel like this is one more person that we're helping, and this is one more person that can help us. And there's that, camaraderie of trying to help each other, to grow each other, whether it's, it doesn't matter if who's doing better than who or who's more advanced than who in terms of education or training or experience, is that we have this collectiveness to try to grow together. And I think that's part of the strength of having a team, that being able to rely on, and then celebrating together some of those wins when we are achieving those milestones. So, I think it's critical to have the space to allow us to do that. And I think we're better to do it than a beautiful fit out.
Yeah, inspirational.
There's the plug, Eric. But no, definitely, it's one of those things. And what do you have some limitations to what you do and don't? I mean, do you medical, commercial spaces?
No, so the commercial space has been a bit quiet because of that, and they've been downsizing and giving space back. So we pushed into medical a little bit because of that. We're doing doctors and dentists, and there's a whole different avenue we could go down about the struggles that I have with pushing into that space. But I'm a disruptor in that space. I'm 30% cheaper than the specialist medical fit out companies, but they will tell you, and their marketing engine is built around telling you that only a specialist dental fit out company can do that type of fit out, which is bullshit. Excuse my French.
Vicious.
Yeah. So it's pretty interesting and exciting, because they want their spaces to be alive, and they want people to come to their spaces,
welcoming,
want to come to their spaces. So
exactly right.
They want bang for their buck.
Yes.
And I think a good fit out company can value engineer space and give you bang for your buck, because architects sometimes draw things. I love architects, so it's not a diss on an architect. And I'm not an architect.
Dreamers.
But sometimes you can design things that are amazing
on paper,
but maybe they're going to cost $1 million and maybe you only got 500,000. So you need a fit out contractor that's going to value engineer that.
Yeah. So are you involved in that design process?
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. If we get in early, you have a much better result. Sometimes my biggest referral partners are often commercial real estate agents, because they take me into the space. And when someone, a prospective buyer, is looking at space, sometimes you can't really imagine what that's going to be like, right? You need someone to say, yeah, look, this is what we can do, and this is how it's going to look, and give you some ideas. And then when you feel that energy, you're more inclined to take the space if it works for you.
So your recommendation is if somebody's taking up a new lease or purchasing a new commercial space, always worthwhile to get a builder there with them, right? At the early stages.
Absolutely,
so at least to get some of that, I guess, practical expertise, and then say, hey, what do you want to do? And what could it cost you before you commit to doing designs that you could spend months doing designs and then come out and go, oh, I don't have $2.5 million.
There's so many little tricks to how good's the internet connection? Is it got parking? Have you checked the strata meeting minutes, and are they due for a massive lift upgrade, or have the waterproof membrane on the roof been? So it's pretty similar to domestic. There's all these things you got to look at.
And you check for these things with them?
I can do, but I often just push them to an expert.
Yeah.
So I advise going to a buyer's agent, a tenant representative generally, and they will help them with finding a space and I look at
some of those important things that you just mentioned.
And I just look at the structure of the building and how good it is. Light is probably the most important thing I could tell anyone looking for space. Try and find natural light, because natural light is amazing. It's so easy to do anything with light, and people feel happier, and having light in a space is amazing.
Yeah, we had an issue in our space because we haven't got the biggest space, but we had we've done an open plan working space. Except we wanted to control the noise because everyone's on phones.
Noise,
so
another big one.
Yeah, and so we, instead of using walls, we used glass partitions, and that was a little bit dearer. But you're getting natural light on both sides of the office, hey? So
and it opens up the space as well too.
Yeah, you should have seen the space before we moved in, Dan. Oh God, it was all partitions, and like old school partitions up to the ceiling. It was
light,
and
is super important.
you cut out light, and someone would sit there, and it looked like an old school drafts, like architectural drafting office where everyone have their cubicle, but there would be no light. It would just be one downlight. Where they sat.
There are so many products out there for sound though too. The really cool, funky products. That come in different shapes and colours and textures, and you throw them on your walls and they make space feel better acoustically. Yeah. But I mean, you don't need to. You can do that later, right? Not a not a ruling out. You wouldn't rule out a space because of its acoustics, because you can dress that.
You can get sort of adjustable boards and things like that. I've seen where screens where you can move them around to.
Yeah, there's so much available.
The sound
in that
absorption
space.
is amazing. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, weight bar, everything.
Yeah.
Interestingly, in the city, there's going to be a bit of a pressure on strata titled space because I think there was 27 buildings that got compulsory acquired in the city in the last couple of years for the metro and for development and other stuff. So it's not like you're going to, in the future, I don't think you're going to be able to go in the city and buy a strata titled, well, not cheaply anyway, a strata titled office space. Okay. Because all the multinationals and all the superannuation funds are buying up buildings and developing.
Dexus, Goodmans, and
they
own a lot of it, right?
A lot of Singaporean companies and people that you wouldn't have even heard of own buildings everywhere. Yeah. And the other thing I think is happening, because there's going to be plenty of vacant commercial space in the city, I think eventually they're going to push to convert some of that into residential, and which I think will be a great thing for Sydney.
Yeah,
convert it. You get more life, more nightlife, the retail and the cafes and everything starts having extra people in there, and office space will just look a bit different.
Maybe you could work where you live at the same time as well too. So just while we're on that topic then, so I know we spoke a lot about commercial. Is residential something that you do or have done or looking to get into, or it's not?
You got some stories
on the side. Yeah, I've got a few stories for you. We were joking about living in Inner West Council, it's called now, not Leichhardt Council anymore, and I've had a couple of massive fights trying to do my own personal developments with council and adaptive reuse of structures, warehouse structures that I'm trying to convert. And at the moment, I'm on Hubert Street, and I put an application in for a driveway crossover. So my plan was to avoid council altogether, and I'm doing it under complying development. So I'm restricted in some ways in what I can build on there. Funny enough, I bought the place to put a duplex on, and a new LEP dropped in Leichhardt Council or Inner West Council, which forbids dual occupancy in the Inner West.
Isn't the whole place made up of dual occupancies?
Mate, what? But they're allowing multi-unit residential development. So if your block's big enough, you can put a block of 3 or 5 or whatever on there, but you can't put dual lock, which I think is a crazy rule. Yeah. Anyway, so I thought I was stuffed on that anyway. So then I went back to just designing and building a big, beautiful 5-bedroom house. But the thing that's tripping me up at the moment is I needed council to approve the driveway crossover because I didn't have a driveway. And I submitted that on the 15th of December.
Oh, last year.
Last year.
Here we are,
and
7 months in.
I still don't have approval for it.
Okay, just for a driveway?
Just for a driveway. So I can't even start building.
Okay.
Wow.
So yeah, there's a lot
of red tape.
Yeah.
CDCs
and private certifiers are definitely going to change the way that we build residentially and commercially.
Yeah.
Rather than go through City Sydney or anything.
I had a similar situation in Canada Bay. We did a building renovation. We applied for a extension to our garage to put like a living space with garage. So a bit of an extension. And we had put a submission in January last year, so January 22, and January 23 came around and we hadn't heard nothing. So then we were like, okay, well, it's every time we call, sort of, we're working on it, bottom of the pile. And then I spoke to my neighbour and he said, you know what, you should say something, And so we found out there was through the grapevine that they've got whoever's looking after your file at council also has a boss at state level. So if you talk to the state level, that seemed to make us go to the top of the pile. And within, I think, a couple of weeks, we had a DA approved. Lots of things that our neighbours said, you'll never get that approved. And they they were pressured into approving it on time. And so it pays to put a bit of pressure, not just at that level, but, going to the next level. Because as you explained yourself with Inner West Council, is that, they can be very tricky. And I had a place in Annandale that I purchased. And what I thought was not a huge project that I was undertaking, we purchased that in the middle of COVID, 2020. I wanted to build a family home, 5-bedroom, 4-car garage thing. So we did some demolition work at the back of the house and pulled down some walls, and no DA. Got into real big trouble because next door to us was a big shot guy at a building company in the city. Was a senior project manager there, and the other neighbour was a lawyer, commercial lawyer. So I was in all sorts of strife because I didn't understand the scope of the work. And Inner West Council come around while I was on my it was on my wedding day. My neighbour called me, and then the next day when I went away for my honeymoon, the council called me and said, "Oh, you better come down because you're going to get a big fine." And so I said, "What's the situation?" He said, "Well, you need a DA." I said, "Well, that's not what the architect and the builder said." And so I'm stuck here. I'm just the client, and if that's what needs to be done, it needs to be done. And I turned up to the house, and I hadn't seen the house being demolished because it was only probably about a week, and I had my wedding on that week. Come to the house, and half the house was dozed.
Oh, wow.
The half the house was dozed, and Inner West Council is the worst council if they're watching it to deal with. And so, and I had very tricky neighbours. And if you're watching, I do apologise, and I wish we had been neighbours. But we had sold our property that was not habitable in the middle of COVID, 2021. We decided to sell it because it was just taking too long.
Well, see, that's hard. People find it really hard to borrow money to buy.
You can't buy a house that is not habitable.
Yeah.
And so we were like sort of sweating, but we went to auction, and I had seen a house down the road go up by, I think it was something like almost 100% versus like they went up 100% in value over the period I bought to when I decided to sell. And so I thought, you know what, this is the best chance because I don't want to deal with Inner West Council. I know moving to Canada Bay to a new property and sold this place for almost 100% gain that was not habitable. Thank God I found someone with a lot of money that could even afford it.
The beauty of property, I say.
It's crazy. And
I love property because of that. It's
but,
just, you've also got things in your own hands with property, right? Like other vehicles like share market, it's not really in your hands. You can probably try and time the market, but you might end up with a smelly finger.
And you can't leverage like you can with property.
And you can value add.
Yep.
And you can add a room, add a car park, add a swimming pool, and
or try to anyway.
Right.
Manufacture equity.
You can add a lot of things. If you have the space in the back, you can put a granny flat in the backyard.
Yep.
A lot of things that you can actually do with properties. You're exactly right.
Certainly.
So Eric, tell me a little bit about, what's next for you. Is there something, that's going to be added on to what you guys do a little bit further?
Oh, I think we'll always be agile in terms of what we do. So it depends what the market throws at us. We're kind of just going into a bit more medical stuff at the minute, but because I love it so much, I can't actually see myself doing anything really different. I do my developments on the side, but that's just personal because I like doing that as well. My company's kind of a vehicle to allow me to invest in things like property, residential property, but I love creating beautiful spaces. So, and there's always new things coming on the market. There's new technology, and it's keeping on top of that and being able to add value to your clients and say, hey, have you looked at this thing? Have you looked at these new fandangled?
Sounds like it brings a very creative side to you, Eric, doesn't it? The work that you do, because you come into a space and now I think about like doing a fit out, like you really don't have any idea what you can do until you talk to someone who's got the experience. And, sometimes when I talk to an architect, I find that I get one dimension of what it could look like. Whereas sometimes if you talk to someone that's more practical, you can get various ideas on, I've seen this, I've seen that, and that can work because an architect has a style they work towards, isn't it?
Yeah. And like my guys say, anyone can draw a five-legged dog. Much harder to make a five-legged dog, right? So you have to have some practical aspect to that as well.
I like it.
I've got a tip for young players though. You only get one chance to make a first impression.
Okay.
So if you are going to spend some money on a fit out or on a space, spend it at the front of house so someone comes in, staff, clients, whatever. That first impression when they open that door and they see what your space is, that's when they make their first impression. And if that's a good impression, then I think that's a good thing because you can save money at the back of house and there's all sorts of imported products you can bring in and you can do them later if you want. But that first impression, that first when you walk in the door, that's when you want to bang for your buck.
Love it. Such a good point. And thank God we spent a little bit more money on our foyer.
There you go.
Good points. Good points. And also, I think probably really on the other topic we were talking about, probably wise choices to understand where you're buying when you're doing a renovation or a fit out. Is knowing who you're dealing with, what councils and things like that, isn't it?
Yeah,
like
or get some advice would be my advice.
Yeah.
The other thing is, people are buying where their clients are too, because you got to think about that. Where are my clients? I don't want to be in Macquarie Park if my clients are all CBD based or vice versa. So there's heaps of research you have to do. And where are my staff based and what's going to make them happy? But sometimes you're buying space for other people, right? So you might be buying it as an investment and you have no idea So you've got to kind of think outside the box and think, right, if I want a prospective tenant to come in and take this space, what will they be looking for?
Yes. So you're sort of future-proofing the value of your
Yeah.
property. Yeah.
Yeah.
Depending on the use case down the road.
So, Eric, any sort of final words for the podcast today?
Seek advice. Seek advice. Always seek an expert. Don't try and do it yourself, I reckon. That's the best bit of advice I can give you.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate your time today on the podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, and if anyone out there needs an amazing company that can take care of their commercial fit outs, or even if you've got residential projects that you'd want someone to run your eyes over, we've got so much experience with QVS and Eric Brown that's been taking care of our clients, but we've also been helping his clients with depreciation. Of course, reach out to him. He's awesome value. And it costs you nothing to have a discussion.
Costs you nothing to have a chat.
Where is the best place for everyone to get in contact with you, Eric?
0400090112.
We'll try to put it on the screen there.
Can we have a rolling banner?
Yes, we'll do it.
Eric at qvsgroup.com.au.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much again. All right, guys, I hope you found some great value out of today's episode. Please like and subscribe and share this episode with someone who you think it'll bring some value to. Bye for now.